The crystal chandelier cast a soft glow across the penthouse suite, illuminating the Manhattan skyline that stretched beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. Harrison Reed stood with his back to the bedroom door, swirling an amber liquid in his crystal tumbler. His wedding tuxedo jacket had been discarded, his bow tie hung loose around his neck, and his white shirt was unbuttoned at the collar. 36 floors below, New York City pulsed with its usual nightlife, oblivious to the tension hanging in the air of the luxury penthouse. Just 12 hours ago, Harrison had said "I do" to a woman he barely knew, a business arrangement disguised as a marriage of love for the society pages. The bathroom door clicked open. Harrison didn't turn immediately, instead taking another slow sip of his whiskey, savoring the burn as it traveled down his throat. When he finally turned, he saw Amara Patel standing in the doorway, still in her wedding dress, though she'd removed the elaborate veil and jewelry. Even with her makeup slightly faded after the long day, she was undeniably beautiful. Elegant features, deep brown eyes, and smooth caramel skin that seemed to glow in the dim light. "I thought you might have changed," Harrison said, his voice cool and detached. "I wasn't sure what you expected," Amara replied, her British Indian accent subtle but noticeable. She remained in the doorway, as if reluctant to fully enter the bedroom. Harrison placed his glass on the side table with deliberate precision. "We should discuss expectations, shouldn't we, since this is, after all, a business arrangement?" "I believe we covered most terms in the prenuptial agreement," Amara said, her posture stiffening slightly. Harrison moved closer, his 6'2" frame towering over her. "Not all terms can be put on paper, Ms. Patel. Or should I say, Mrs. Reed?" Amara met his gaze unflinchingly. "What additional terms did you have in mind?" Harrison circled her slowly, like a predator assessing its prey. "I received an interesting call this afternoon from an old acquaintance who knows Julian Blackwood quite well." At the mention of Julian's name, Amara's composure faltered momentarily. "And what did this acquaintance have to say?" "That you and Julian were quite close." Harrison stopped directly in front of her. "That perhaps you were more than just business associates." "That's absurd," Amara said, her voice steady despite the accusation. "Julian Blackwood and I worked on a telecommunications project in London 3 years ago, nothing more." Harrison's laugh was cold. "That's not what I heard. And given that our marriage is predicated on certain expectations of propriety, I believe I have the right to verify." "Verify?" Amara's eyes widened as understanding dawned. "You can't possibly mean—" "I need to know if you're a virgin, Amara." Harrison's words hung in the air between them, sharp and unyielding. Amara took a step back, her hand instinctively rising to her throat. "That wasn't part of our agreement." "It was implied," Harrison countered. "My father's will stipulates a respectable marriage. The Reed family name has never been associated with scandal." "And you believe I would bring scandal?" Anger flashed in Amara's eyes. "Based on a rumor from someone who clearly doesn't know me at all?" "Prove me wrong, then," Harrison challenged, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Prove that you are what you claim to be, or this marriage ends tonight. I'll pay the penalty clause in the contract, but I won't be made a fool of." Amara stood frozen, disbelief and hurt warring on her face. "You want to check if I'm a virgin, like I'm some piece of property to be inspected?" "I want to ensure that what I've invested in is authentic," Harrison replied coldly. Tears welled in Amara's eyes, but she blinked them back fiercely. "And if I refuse this degrading request? Then I'll assume the rumors are true, and we'll begin divorce proceedings in the morning." The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words and emotions. Outside, a distant siren wailed, then faded into the night. "Fine," Amara finally said, her voice barely audible. "If this is what it takes to prove my worth to you, then do what you must. But know this, Harrison Reed, I will never forget this moment." Harrison nodded curtly, gesturing toward the bed. The examination that followed was clinical, detached and deeply humiliating for Amara, who lay rigid, staring at the ceiling as tears silently tracked down her temples into her hair. When it was over, Harrison stood, his expression unreadable. "You were telling the truth," he said, as if commenting on the weather. Amara said nothing, simply pulling her dress back into place and walking stiffly to the bathroom. The door closed with a soft click that somehow sounded more final than if she had slammed it. Harrison returned to the window, picked up his whiskey, and drained it in one swallow. He had gotten what he wanted, confirmation that his business arrangement was secure. Yet as he stared out at the glittering city, he felt strangely hollow. As if he had won a battle but was already losing a war he didn't know he was fighting. 3 months earlier, Harrison Reed sat in his father's study, surrounded by the ghosts of generations of Reed men. Oil paintings of stern-faced patriarchs lined the mahogany-paneled walls, their eyes seeming to follow him as he read through the will for the 3rd time. "This is absurd," Harrison muttered, tossing the document onto the antique desk. "He can't possibly enforce this from the grave." Walter Simmons, the family attorney who had served the Reeds for over 30 years, adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses. "I'm afraid your father was quite clear, Harrison. To receive the controlling 40% share of Reed Enterprises, you must be married within 6 months of his passing. The remaining shares will be distributed among the board members." Harrison ran a hand through his dark hair, a rare display of frustration from a man known for his icy control. At 34, he had built Reed Enterprises from a respectable technology company into a global powerhouse, yet his father, in his final act, had found a way to maintain control even in death. "And if I refuse?" Harrison asked, though he already knew the answer. "Then you become a minority shareholder in your own company," Walter replied. "The board could potentially vote to remove you as CEO." The thought was intolerable. Reed Enterprises wasn't just a company to Harrison, it was his legacy, his creation. He had sacrificed everything for it: relationships, friendships, any semblance of a normal life. The idea of losing control to the board, many of whom had opposed his more innovative strategies, was unthinkable. "Find me a suitable candidate," Harrison said finally. "Someone with the right background, education, connections. This will be a business arrangement, nothing more." 2 weeks later, Walter presented him with a file. Amara Patel, 28 years old, graduate of Oxford and MIT, currently the Chief Innovation Officer at Patel Technologies. Her father, Vikram Patel, is the founder and CEO, but he's been diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. Harrison studied the photograph clipped to the file. Amara Patel was undeniably beautiful, with intelligent eyes and a composed expression that revealed little. "Why would she agree to this arrangement?" Harrison asked, flipping through her impressive credentials. "Patel Technologies is facing a hostile takeover attempt from Meridian Global. Without her father at the helm, they're vulnerable. An alliance with Reed Enterprises would provide the protection they need." Harrison nodded slowly. It was perfect. A mutually beneficial arrangement with clear terms. No messy emotions, no romantic expectations, just business. Their first meeting took place in Walter's office, neutral territory. Amara arrived precisely on time, dressed in a tailored navy suit that spoke of quiet wealth and impeccable taste. She shook Harrison's hand firmly, her gaze direct and assessing. "Mr. Reed," she said, her voice carrying the faint lilt of a British education layered over her Indian accent. "Ms. Patel," he replied, gesturing for her to sit. "I appreciate your willingness to discuss this unconventional proposal." "Let's be clear," Amara said, placing her leather portfolio on the table between them. "This is a business transaction. I need to protect my father's company and legacy while he focuses on his treatment. You need a wife to satisfy your father's archaic conditions. I see no reason why we can't help each other." Harrison found himself impressed by her directness. "My thoughts exactly. I propose a 3-year contract, will appear as a devoted couple in public, maintain separate residences privately, and dissolve the marriage once my shares are secured and your father's company is stabilized. 5 years, Amara countered. Meridian Global is persistent and my father's treatment may be prolonged. 4, Harrison replied, with an option to extend if necessary. Amara considered this, then nodded. Acceptable. I have additional terms regarding my continued role at Patel Technologies and my humanitarian projects. As long as they don't interfere with required public appearances, I have no objections. They hammered out the details over the next 2 hours. Joint appearances, living arrangements, financial considerations, and the all-important confidentiality clauses. By the end, they had a comprehensive agreement that protected both their interests. I believe we have a deal, Ms. Patel, Harrison said, extending his hand once more. Amara took it, her grip firm and businesslike. Indeed we do, Mr. Reed. I look forward to our mutually beneficial partnership. 3 weeks later, they were married in a lavish ceremony at St. Patrick's Cathedral, followed by a reception at the plaza that was featured in every society page and business publication. They smiled for the cameras, danced the obligatory first dance, and played the part of the besotted couple to perfection. No one would have guessed that their vows were as empty as the champagne glasses littering the tables at the end of the night. Morning light streamed through the penthouse windows, casting long shadows across the king-sized bed. Harrison stirred, his hand instinctively reaching across the sheets only to find them cold and empty. He opened his eyes, momentarily disoriented. The events of the previous night came rushing back, the wedding, the reception, the confrontation, Amara, he called, his voice echoing in the silent apartment. No response. Harrison rose, pulling on a silk robe as he moved through the penthouse. The living room was empty, the kitchen untouched. On the marble countertop of the island, something glinted in the morning light. Harrison approached slowly, already knowing what he would find. Amara's wedding ring, a flawless 5-carat diamond set in platinum, sat atop a folded piece of cream stationery. Harrison picked up the note, his jaw tightening as he read. When you're ready to begin this marriage with respect instead of suspicion, you know where to find me. Until then, I believe we would both benefit from some distance, eh? Damn it, Harrison muttered, crumpling the note in his fist. He had expected compliance, perhaps some lingering resentment, but not this, not outright defiance. He grabbed his phone and dialed Amara's number. It went straight to voicemail. Harrison's next call was to his head of security. Find Mrs. Reed, now. Within the hour, his security team reported that Amara had left the hotel at 5:30 a.m. in a taxi. They had tracked the taxi to JFK Airport, but by then, the trail went cold. Her scheduled flight to Mumbai, where she was supposed to check on her father before joining Harrison for their honeymoon in the Maldives, had departed without her on the passenger list. Harrison was pacing his office, barking orders to his assistant about canceling the honeymoon arrangements, when his phone rang. The screen displayed Vikram Patel. Mr. Patel, Harrison answered, his voice carefully controlled. How are you feeling today? Where is my daughter, Mr. Reed? Vikram's voice was weak but direct, the illness having taken its toll but not his sharp mind. I was about to ask you the same question, Harrison replied. I assumed she had flown to Mumbai to see you. There was a long pause. My daughter has not arrived in Mumbai, nor has she contacted me since the reception. As her husband, I expected you to know her whereabouts. The accusation was clear, and Harrison felt an unexpected twinge of guilt. We had a disagreement last night. She left early this morning, leaving a note suggesting she needed space. A disagreement? Vikram's voice hardened. On your wedding night? What exactly did you do to my daughter, Mr. Reed? Harrison pinched the bridge of his nose. With all due respect, Mr. Patel, that's between Amara and myself. Let me be clear, Vikram said, his voice gaining strength, fueled by paternal concern. Our arrangement was meant to benefit both our families. If you have harmed my daughter in any way, I will use every resource at my disposal to ensure you regret it, regardless of my health." The call ended abruptly, leaving Harrison staring at his phone. The situation was spiraling out of control. If word got out that his bride had fled after their wedding night, the speculation would be rampant. The board would question his stability, competitors would sense weakness, and the carefully constructed image he had built would crumble. Harrison buzzed his assistant. "Get me everything we have on Amara Patel, her projects, her friends, her favorite places, and book me on the next flight to Mumbai." "But, sir, your meetings this week?" "Reschedule them," Harrison snapped. "This takes priority." As his team scrambled to comply, Harrison returned to the window, staring out at the city below. For the first time in years, he felt something he hadn't experienced since childhood. The uncomfortable sensation of having made a mistake he couldn't easily fix with money or power. He needed to find Amara not just to salvage their arrangement, but to understand why her absence left him feeling so unexpectedly unsettled. Mumbai greeted Harrison with a sensory assault. The humid heat, the cacophony of horns and voices, the kaleidoscope of colors, and the mingling sense of spices, exhaust, and humanity. His driver navigated through the chaotic traffic with practiced ease, weaving between auto rickshaws and motorcycles as they made their way to the gleaming headquarters of Patel Technologies in the Bandra Kula complex. The building stood in stark contrast to its surroundings, a modern glass and steel structure that reflected Harrison's own architectural preferences. Inside, the reception area was cool and quiet, a sanctuary from the frenetic energy outside. "Mr. Reed," a woman's voice called as he approached the reception desk. "I'm Maya Sharma, Amara's executive assistant." Harrison turned to face a poised woman in her early 30s, her expression professionally neutral, but her eyes cold. "Ms. Sharma, I was hoping to speak with Mr. Patel." "Mr. Patel is undergoing treatment today and is unavailable," Maya replied. "He asked me to assist you instead." Harrison recognized the deflection for what it was. Vikram Patel had no intention of seeing him. "Then perhaps you can help me locate my wife." Maya's expression didn't change, but her tone cooled further. "I'm afraid I don't know Mrs. Reed's current location. She contacted me yesterday to handle some urgent matters, but didn't disclose where she was staying." "I find that hard to believe," Harrison said. "You're her closest colleague according to our research." "And her friend," Maya added pointedly, "which is why I respect her privacy." Harrison changed tactics. "Show me her office." It wasn't a request, and Maya knew it. With a slight nod, she led him through the building to a corner office with views of the city. Unlike Harrison's minimalist workspace in New York, Amara's office was warm and personal. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with technical manuals and literature. The other walls displayed framed photographs of Amara at various project sites, surrounded by children in a classroom, cutting ribbons at clinic openings, standing with teams of engineers. Harrison moved closer to examine them. "These are her projects?" "Some of them," Maya replied. "Amara oversees Patel Foundation's humanitarian initiatives alongside her corporate responsibilities." Harrison picked up a framed photo from Amara's desk. She stood with an older woman who shared her features, both smiling broadly in front of a small building with a sign reading Patel Mobile Health Clinic. "Her mother?" Harrison asked. Maya's expression softened slightly. "Yes, Nisha Patel. She died 5 years ago during the Chennai floods. She was helping evacuate a rural hospital when the waters rose too quickly." Harrison set the photo down carefully. "I wasn't aware." "There's a lot you don't know about your wife, Mr. Reed." The rebuke was subtle but clear. Harrison turned to face Maya directly. "Then educate me." Something in his tone must have convinced her of his sincerity, because after a moment's hesitation, Maya nodded. "Follow me." She led him to a conference room where she pulled up a presentation on a large screen. "This is what Amara has built over the past 7 years. For the next hour, Harrison watched as Maya walked him through Amara's projects: technology education centers in Mumbai's slums, mobile health clinics serving rural communities, clean water initiatives, and a revolutionary low-cost telecommunications system bringing internet access to remote villages. The profits from these ventures go back into the communities they serve, Maya explained. Amara believes technology should elevate everyone, not just those who can afford it. Harrison studied the financial reports with growing respect. The projects weren't just charitable endeavors, they were sustainable, innovative business models that created real impact while developing new markets. "Why didn't she include any of this in our discussions?" Harrison asked. Maya gave him a measured look. "Because you never asked. Your agreement was purely transactional. Amara kept her personal passions separate." Before Harrison could respond, Maya's phone buzzed. She checked the message, then looked up with a frown. "I need to take this. Feel free to continue reviewing the materials." As soon as she left, Harrison noticed a folder she had deliberately left open on the table. Inside was a newspaper clipping about Julian Blackwood, the British tech entrepreneur whose name had triggered Harrison's suspicions. The article detailed how Blackwood had been quietly removed from a joint venture with Patel Technologies after allegations of ethical violations, specifically attempting to patent technology developed by aid recipients without credit or compensation. A handwritten note in the margin read, "JB threatened again today. Says he'll ruin me if I don't reconsider the partnership." The date was from 3 years ago exactly, when the rumors about Amara and Julian had begun circulating. Harrison sat back, a cold realization washing over him. He had accused his wife based on rumors started by a vindictive man she had rightfully cut ties with. And in doing so, he had become just another man who had tried to control and diminish her. When Maya returned, Harrison was standing at the window, looking out at the city with new eyes. "I need to find her," he said without turning around, "not to bring her back, but to apologize." Maya studied him for a long moment before making a decision. "She's at her mother's ancestral home in Kerala, a lakeside property near Kumarakom." Harrison turned, genuine gratitude in his expression. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet, Mr. Reed," Maya replied. "Amara went there to be alone. She may not want to see you at all." The journey to Kerala took Harrison through landscapes that seemed to belong to another world entirely. From the crowded streets of Mumbai to the lush, verdant waterways of God's own country, as the taxi driver proudly called it, the contrast couldn't have been more stark. As they approached Kumarakom, the road narrowed, winding between coconut palms and rice paddies. The air grew heavy with moisture from the nearby lake, carrying the scent of jasmine and earth after rain. Harrison found himself loosening his tie, then removing it entirely, a small but symbolic shedding of his New York persona. "That is the Patel house," the driver said, pointing to a property set back from the road. Unlike the modern glass and steel of Patel Technologies, this was a traditional Kerala home, a Nalukettu, the driver explained, with sloping terracotta-tiled roofs, wooden pillars, and an inner courtyard visible through the open gate. Harrison paid the driver and stood for a moment, taking in the peaceful setting. The contrast between this place and the penthouse where he had humiliated Amara couldn't have been more profound. Here, surrounded by nature and history, he felt oddly out of place in his tailored suit and polished shoes. He approached the gate slowly, uncertain of his welcome. A woman in her 60s appeared, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in a bun, her expression wary as she assessed the stranger at the gate. "I'm looking for Amara Patel," Harrison said. "I'm her—" "I know who you are, Mr. Reed," the woman interrupted. "I am Lakshmi, Mrs. Patel's housekeeper. Miss Amara is not receiving visitors." "Please," Harrison said, the word feeling foreign on his tongue. When was the last time he had genuinely pleaded for anything? "I need to speak with her." Lakshmi's expression remained unmoved. "Miss Amara came here for peace, something you did not provide on your wedding night." Harrison winced at the direct accusation. That's why I'm here, to apologize. Words are easy, Mr. Reed. Actions matter more. Before Harrison could respond, a voice called from inside the house. It's all right, Lakshmi. Let him in. Amara appeared in the doorway, dressed in a simple cotton salwar kameez, her hair loose around her shoulders. Without makeup or jewelry, she looked younger, more vulnerable, yet somehow more authentic than the polished bride he had married. Lakshmi stepped aside reluctantly, giving Harrison a warning look as he passed. The message was clear: cause more pain, and there would be consequences, regardless of his wealth or status. Harrison followed Amara through the house to a veranda overlooking the lake. The setting sun cast golden light across the water, silhouetting the fishing boats returning with their day's catch. This was my mother's favorite place, Amara said, taking a seat on a wooden swing suspended from the ceiling. She used to say that water always finds its level, just as people eventually reveal their true nature. Harrison remained standing, feeling too restless to sit. I deserved that. Yes, you did, Amira agreed, her directness unchanged despite their surroundings. Why are you here, Harrison? To apologize, he said. What I did was unforgivable. I humiliated you based on rumors and my own insecurities. Amira studied him, her expression unreadable. Insecurities? I didn't think the great Harrison Reed had any of those. More than you might imagine, he admitted, surprising himself with his candor. I've spent my entire life proving myself to a father who never thought I was good enough. When he made marriage a condition of my inheritance, I saw it as his final attempt to control me from beyond the grave. So you controlled me instead, Amara said quietly. Harrison flinched at the truth in her words. Yes, and I'm deeply sorry for that. I know about Julian Blackwood, he continued. I saw the file in your office. Maya left it for me to find. A small smile touched Amara's lips. Maya has always been protective. With good reason, it seems. Harrison finally sat down in a chair across from her. The rumors about you and Julian, they were his revenge for your exposing his ethical violations? Amara nodded. He tried to steal technology developed by village women in our education program. When I stopped him, he threatened to ruin my reputation. In our industry, a woman's credibility is fragile enough without such rumors. Yet you never defended yourself to me, Harrison observed. Why should I have to? Amara countered. A marriage, even one based on a business arrangement, should begin with basic respect and trust. You offered neither. The truth of her words hung in the air between them. Harrison had no defense, no counter-argument. For perhaps the first time in his adult life, he was completely in the wrong, and he knew it. You're right, he said simply. I failed at the most fundamental level. I wouldn't blame you if you wanted to end our arrangement entirely. Amara looked out at the lake, now darkening as the sun disappeared behind the distant hills. What would that accomplish? Your company would suffer. My father's treatment depends on the stability our alliance provides. Some things are more important than business, Harrison said, surprising himself again. Amara turned to him, genuine curiosity in her expression. Do you actually believe that? Harrison considered the question seriously. I'm beginning to. A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the gentle creaking of the swing and the distant calls of birds settling for the night. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a beginning. Stay for dinner, Amara said finally. Lakshmi makes the best mean curry in Kerala. Then we can discuss where we go from here. It wasn't much, but it was more than Harrison deserved. I'd like that, he said. And for the first time since arriving in India, he felt like he could breathe freely again. Dinner was unlike anything Harrison had experienced before. They sat cross-legged on floor mats at a low table, eating from banana leaves with their fingers, or, rather, Amara ate with practiced grace while Harrison fumbled, earning amused glances from Lakshmi as she served dish after dish of unfamiliar but delicious food. You're supposed to mix the rice with the curry using only your right hand, Amara instructed, demonstrating the technique. Like this. Harrison attempted to mimic her movements, succeeding only in getting curry on his wrist. I think I need more practice. Clearly, Amara agreed, but there was a hint of warmth in her voice that hadn't been there before. As they ate, Amara told him about growing up between two worlds, spending school terms in London and summers here in Kerala with her mother's family. She spoke of her grandfather, who had started Patel Technologies from a small radio repair shop, and her mother, who had insisted that the company's success be measured not just in profits, but in positive impact. That's why the foundation work is so important to me, she explained. It's my mother's legacy. Harrison listened, really listened, in a way he rarely did during business meetings. He found himself genuinely interested in her stories, in understanding the experiences that had shaped her into the woman sitting across from him. After dinner, they returned to the veranda, now lit by the soft glow of lanterns. The night air was filled with the sounds of frogs and crickets, a natural symphony so different from the constant hum of New York. Tell me about your childhood, Amara said, settling back onto the swing. Not the official biography version, the real one. Harrison hesitated. He rarely spoke about his past, preferring to focus on the present and future. But something about the night, about this place so removed from his normal life, loosened his usual reserve. My mother left when I was 8, he began. She couldn't handle my father's obsession with the company, with legacy. He threw himself even deeper into work after she left, leaving me with a succession of nannies and boarding schools. He told her about the constant pressure to excel, about report cards that were never quite good enough, about achievements that were acknowledged with a nod rather than praise. When I graduated from Harvard Business School, my father's only comment was that I should have finished a year earlier like he did, Harrison said with a wry smile. That's when I decided to stop seeking his approval and start proving him wrong instead. And now? Amara asked. Now that he's gone? Harrison considered the question. Now I'm not sure what I'm trying to prove, or to whom. The admission hung in the air between them, surprisingly freeing in its honesty. Perhaps that's something worth figuring out, Amara suggested gently. They talked late into the night, moving from personal histories to professional challenges, finding unexpected common ground in their approaches to business, despite their different philosophies. Harrison was surprised to discover how much he enjoyed simply conversing with her, without agenda or pretense. As the night grew late, Lakshmi appeared with a pointed look at the clock. I should find a hotel, Harrison said, rising from his chair. The nearest decent one is an hour away, Amara replied. We have guest rooms here. Harrison followed her through the house to a simple but comfortable room with windows overlooking the garden. The bed was draped with mosquito netting, and a ceiling fan turned lazily overhead. It's not your penthouse, Amara said, but it has its charms. It's perfect, Harrison replied, and meant it. Amara lingered in the doorway. Harrison, I'm not ready to return to New York yet. I need more time. I understand, he said. Take all the time you need. But, she continued, I'm willing to try again, to see if we can build something more meaningful than what we started with. Harrison felt an unexpected surge of relief. I'd like that. We'll need new terms, Amara said, her practical nature reasserting itself. Equal partnership, real respect, no more suspicion or control. Agreed, Harrison said without hesitation. We'll rewrite the agreement together. Amara nodded, satisfied. Good night, Harrison. Good night, Amara. As she turned to leave, Harrison called after her, Thank you for giving me a second chance. Amara paused, looking back at him with an expression that was both cautious and hopeful. Everyone deserves at least one, she said softly. Even Harrison Reed. After she left, Harrison stood at the window, looking out at the moonlight reflecting on the lake. For the first time since his father's death, perhaps longer, he felt a sense of peace. Whatever happened between him and Amara going forward, He knew that something fundamental had shifted within himself. The business arrangement was evolving into something neither of them had anticipated, something that, surprisingly, he found himself wanting to explore. Harrison woke to unfamiliar sounds: birds calling, the gentle lapping of water against the shore, and the distant chatter of village life beginning its day. For a moment he was disoriented, the simple room with its whitewashed walls, a stark contrast to his sleek Manhattan penthouse. He'd dressed in yesterday's clothes, now wrinkled from travel, and made his way to the veranda. Amara was already there, dressed in yoga pants and a loose cotton top, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail as she moved through a series of sun salutations. Harrison paused, not wanting to interrupt. There was something mesmerizing about her fluid movements, the quiet concentration on her face. This was yet another side of Amara he hadn't known existed, the woman beneath the polished corporate exterior. She completed her routine and turned, noticing him for the first time. "Good morning. Did you sleep well?" "Better than I have in months," Harrison admitted. "Something about this place. It has that effect," Amara agreed, reaching for a glass of what looked like freshly squeezed juice. "There's coffee if you need it. Lakshmi knows Americans can't function without their morning caffeine." Harrison smiled at the gentle teasing. She's not wrong. They shared a simple breakfast of fresh fruit, doses with coconut chutney, and strong coffee. As they ate, Harrison's phone buzzed with incoming messages, the outside world intruding on their temporary sanctuary. "Problem?" Amara asked, noting his frown. "Several," Harrison admitted. "The board is getting nervous about our sudden honeymoon changes, and there's a situation with the Singapore acquisition that needs attention." Amara nodded, understanding the demands of business all too well. Real life beckons. Unfortunately. Harrison set his phone down, giving her his full attention. "But before we return to all that, I want to be clear about something. I meant what I said last night. I want to build a real partnership with you, Amara, not just for business reasons." Amara studied him, her expression thoughtful. "I believe you mean that now. But New York is different from Kerala. It's easy to make promises in a place like this, away from pressure and expectations." "Then let me prove it," Harrison said. "Come back with me. Not as my trophy wife or business arrangement, but as my equal partner, in every sense." Amara considered his words. "I have conditions." "Name them." "First, I maintain my position at Patel Technologies and my foundation work. No more suggestions that I should step back to be a corporate wife." Harrison nodded. "Agreed." "Second, we live separately for the next month. Adjacent apartments in the same building if you prefer, but I need my own space while we rebuild trust." This request surprised him, but Harrison understood the reasoning. "I can arrange that." "Third," Amara continued, "we attend counseling together. If we're going to make this work, we need a neutral third party to help us navigate the transition from business arrangement to real relationship." Harrison hesitated. The idea of discussing his personal life with a stranger went against every private instinct he possessed, but he recognized the wisdom in her request. "Agreed," he said finally. "Anything else?" "Yes," Amara said, her expression softening slightly. "We date. Properly. No more skipping the foundation of a relationship just because we have a marriage certificate." Harrison found himself smiling at this last condition. "I think I can manage that." "Good," Amara said, returning his smile with a tentative one of her own. "Because I suspect there's more to Harrison Reed than the ruthless businessman everyone fears. Just as there's more to Amara Patel than the perfect heiress everyone admires," Harrison countered. A comfortable silence fell between them, filled with possibility rather than tension. Later that morning, as they prepared to leave the lakeside sanctuary, Harrison received another call from New York. This time, he excused himself and stepped into the garden to take it. "Reed," he answered crisply. "Harrison, it's James. The board is meeting tomorrow morning. There are Concerns about the stability of your new marriage? Especially after you suddenly flew to India without explanation. Harrison watched as Amara spoke with Lakshmi on the veranda, her hands moving expressively as she laughed at something the older woman said. The board has nothing to worry about, Harrison replied. In fact, Mrs. Reed and I will be returning to New York tonight. We'll both attend the meeting tomorrow. Both of you? James sounded surprised. That's unexpected. Get used to it, Harrison said. From now on, Amara will be taking a more active role in Reed Enterprises. Her experience with Patel Technologies and her foundation work brings valuable perspective we've been lacking. There was a pause on the other end of the line. This wasn't part of the original arrangement. The arrangement has evolved, Harrison said firmly, and it's non-negotiable. He ended the call and rejoined Amara on the veranda, where she was saying goodbye to Lakshmi. Everything okay? She asked, noting his expression. Just setting some expectations, Harrison replied. The board meeting tomorrow might be interesting. Amara raised an eyebrow. Are you sure you want me there? It might complicate things. I'm counting on it, Harrison said with a smile. It's time Reed Enterprises had a shake-up, and I can't think of anyone better qualified to help me deliver it. As they walked to the waiting car, Harrison felt Amara's hand slip into his, a small gesture, but significant. Whatever challenges awaited them in New York, they would face them together, not as a business arrangement, but as partners beginning to forge something genuine from an inauspicious start. For the first time in his life, Harrison Reed was embarking on a journey whose outcome he couldn't predict or control, and, surprisingly, he was looking forward to every moment of it. The Reed Enterprises boardroom exuded power and tradition. Mahogany paneling, leather chairs, and portraits of past chairmen, all men, created an atmosphere that was deliberately intimidating to outsiders. Harrison had always appreciated this effect. Today, seeing it through Amara's eyes, he found it somewhat archaic. They arrived together, but not quite as a united front, the tension between them still palpable despite their progress in Kerala. Harrison wore his standard armor, a perfectly tailored Tom Ford suit, power tie, and the expressionless mask he'd perfected over years of negotiations. Amara chose a silk sari in deep burgundy, paired with subtle gold jewelry that had belonged to her mother. The board members were already seated when they entered, their conversations halting abruptly. 8 men and 1 woman, all over 50, all watching with barely concealed curiosity as Harrison guided Amara to a seat beside his, at the head of the table. Ladies and gentlemen, Harrison began without preamble, I believe you all know my wife, Amara Patel Reed. She'll be joining us today and for future meetings as we discuss the integration of Patel Technologies innovations with our existing product lines. James Whitfield, the longest-serving board member and Harrison's father's closest ally, cleared his throat. This is highly irregular, Harrison. Board meetings are confidential and Mrs. Reed isn't a member. Not yet, Harrison replied coolly. But as she holds 40% of the company through our marriage, I believe she has every right to be here. A ripple of discomfort passed through the room. The board had approved of Harrison's marriage as a means to secure his inheritance, but they clearly hadn't anticipated Amara's active involvement. Perhaps we should discuss this in private first, suggested Victoria Chen, the lone female board member. There's nothing to discuss, Harrison stated. My wife is here at my invitation, unless someone wishes to challenge my authority as CEO. The silence that followed confirmed what Harrison already knew. No one was prepared to directly oppose him. At least not yet. Excellent, he continued. Now let's address the Singapore acquisition. For the next hour, Harrison led the meeting with his usual efficiency. But with one significant difference, he repeatedly deferred to Amara on matters related to technology integration and emerging markets. At first, she spoke carefully, aware of the scrutiny. But as the discussion progressed, her natural confidence emerged. When the conversation turned to Reed Enterprises' struggling educational technology division, Amara leaned forward. If I may, she said, her voice clear and assured, Reed's approach to EdTech has been fundamentally flawed. You're designing products for administrators, not students or teachers. James Whitfield's eyebrows rose. Our market research is limited to institutions that can afford your premium pricing, Amara interrupted smoothly. Meanwhile, you're missing the explosive growth in developing markets where affordable, adaptable technology is transforming education. She pulled out her tablet and projected a series of graphs onto the screen at the end of the room. These are adoption rates for Patel's educational platforms across Southeast Asia and Africa. We've captured 60% market share in just 3 years by focusing on accessibility and local customization. The board members studied the data with reluctant interest as Amara continued. Reed Enterprises has superior hardware capabilities, but Patel has the software solutions and market understanding. Together, we could dominate the global edtech space within 2 years. Harrison watched the board's reactions shift from skepticism to consideration. Even James seemed grudgingly impressed by Amara's presentation. What you're suggesting would require significant restructuring of our edtech division, Victoria noted. Yes, Amara agreed, starting with relocating part of the development team to Mumbai to work directly with our engineers. Our engineers? James questioned sharply. You speak as if Patel Technologies is already part of Reed Enterprises. Isn't that the logical next step? Harrison interjected. The marriage secured my inheritance, but a full merger would maximize the benefits for both companies. The boardroom erupted in overlapping voices, some supportive, others concerned about what such a merger would mean for the company's direction and leadership. Harrison raised a hand for silence. We're not making that decision today. Amara and I will prepare a detailed proposal for your consideration at next month's meeting. He glanced at his watch. Now, if you'll excuse us, my wife and I have another engagement. It was a power move, leaving while the board was still processing the implications of what had just transpired. Harrison placed his hand lightly on Amara's back as they exited, maintaining the image of unity until the boardroom doors closed behind them. In the elevator, Amara finally spoke. That was interesting. You were brilliant, Harrison said sincerely. You had them cornered with those adoption rates. Not all of them, Amara observed. Your Mr. Whitfield looks like he's already planning a coup. Harrison's lips curved in a rare, genuine smile. James has been planning to replace me since the day my father died, but he needs allies, and after your performance today, he'll find them harder to come by. The elevator reached the ground floor, and as they crossed the lobby, Harrison noticed people watching them. The power couple of the moment, their marriage the subject of speculation throughout New York's business community. Ready for phase 2? He asked as they approached the revolving doors. Amara adjusted her sari with a determined expression. Absolutely. Let's give them something to really talk about. Outside, a car waited to take them to their next destination, a charity gala where New York's elite would be watching their every interaction, looking for signs of whether the Reed-Patel marriage was merely a business arrangement or something more. What they would see, Harrison was determined, would be a united front. What existed behind that facade was still evolving, still fragile, but increasingly real.